I bet most of you in this room remember comedian George Burns. Club gave a big dinner in honor of his 95th birthday, 95 years old. The stage was loaded with talent. One of the first speakers was Irving Brecher, the creator-writer of the popular TV show way back then in the 50s of The Life of Riley, and the director of many fine movies as well. Now here's what Brecher had to say about George Burns. What is so unusual about our guest of honor this evening is that in a profession that is so frenetically competitive, where the pressure to make it big is so intense that often friends turn on one another, George Burns does not have a single enemy. Brecher paused for a moment, and then he added, "They're all dead." Well, that raises the question, though, who are your enemies? That's the question our gospel is setting before us today. Now, you might say, I don't have any enemies. A little girl once wrote her pastor, "Dear pastor, I heard you say to love our enemies. I am only 6 and do not have any yet. I hope to have some when I'm 7. Love, Jennifer." That might be your attitude. I don't have any enemies. I love everybody and everybody loves me. Maybe so. Or maybe we need to stretch our view of who an enemy might be. Could someone in your family, in a sense, be an enemy? A sister-in-law, perhaps, or even a parent. Or maybe someone with whom you work. Maybe it's someone that you're in competition with. In the early days of electricity in this country, Thomas Edison was promoting DC current, direct current, the kind you have in batteries, and George Westinghouse was promoting AC current, alternating current, the kind that we have, in all of our electrical outlets and so on today. As homes were being wired for electricity, Westinghouse's AC current was winning out the competition. Edison, hoping to undermine the popularity of Westinghouse's AC current, hit upon a plan. Edison had been asked by a member of the New York State Commission on Capital Punishment to help them come up with an alternative form of execution to the customary hanging. Tying his two problems together, Edison invented the modern electric chair using Westinghouse's AC current. When names were suggested for this type of execution, such words as electricide were put forward. Edison, however, was adamant. He insisted that they needed to call this type what's the word I want to say? Type of execution, that it would be called being Westinghoused. Competitors may become enemies, in other words. Not just in business, but even within a family and within a group of friends. Brothers compete, sisters compete, spouses compete, friends compete, neighbors compete. There's nothing wrong with competition, but feelings can get rubbed raw. Resentments can build. Soon, a neighbor is secretly glad to see another neighbor's misfortune. Who is your enemy? There may be persons whom we secretly harbor ill feelings toward that we've never thought to classify under Jesus' definition as enemies. But in a sense, they are enemies. They are persons for whom you have ill feelings, or they're persons who harbor ill feelings toward you. Of course, some enemies may arise because we try to do the right thing. I recall a story about a pastor who was concerned about some unsavory businesses that had opened near a school. His protests finally led to a court case, and the defense attorney did all he could to embarrass the pastor. "Are you not a pastor?" the lawyer asked. "And doesn't the word pastor mean shepherd?" To this definition, the minister agreed. "Well, if you are a shepherd, why aren't you out taking care of your sheep?" "Because today," said the pastor, "I'm fighting the wolves." Well, there are wolves out there. Some enemies need to be made. If there are persons who are hurting others, and you are in a position of being able to stop them, then that is an enemy you maybe need to make. Notice that Jesus did not say, do not have enemies. Anyone who tries to do anything of significance in this world is going to end up with some enemies. I can guarantee you that both Mother Teresa and Billy Graham, as respected as they were, had enemies. Who are your enemies? Your enemy could be someone who is tempting you to do wrong things. Your enemy could be someone who has hurt you in the past, and that hurt lingers and won't go away. Your enemy could be someone you simply disagree with strongly, but that disagreement has caused a barrier to be erected between the two of you. Who is your enemy? That's the first question that this morning's gospel raises for us. The second is this: how is your enemy affecting you spiritually? There are three ways that you can respond to an enemy, you know. First of all, you can retaliate. You might remember the old story about a man who was informed by his doctor that he had rabies. The doctor had to leave the exam room for a minute, and he came back and he saw the man sitting down there frantically writing on a piece of paper. And he asked the man, are you writing a will? The doctor asked. No, said the man. I'm making a list of all the people I want to bite. Whoa. Back in 1940, a paper boy was nipped by a dog as he was making deliveries. He reported it to the Humane Society, which took the animal in for observation, kept it for a few days, and then released it to the owner. But she never forgot the incident. Decades later, she continued tormenting the former newsboy with phone calls. Our newspapers carry stories all the time about people, and the news and online and so on, about people who have grievances against someone else, and they try to settle that grievance through retaliation, through getting even. Spiritually, retaliation is deadly. There was a television movie that pointed out how deadly it is. It was about a young man who had a love-hate relationship with his father. He tried desperately to hurt his dad in a business deal. When the stepmother learned of it and chastised him, he responded, I just want to beat him once. And she replied, you haven't beaten him. You have become him. And it's true. Retaliation does permanent damage, not only to a relationship and not only maybe to our enemy, but maybe most of all to ourselves. We become different people, twisted and evil. But that is one way to deal with an enemy: retaliate. Another way is to secretly harbor resentment toward that person. It's probably the most common spiritual problem that Christians have. We are nice people. We really are. We would not openly harm anyone. But boy, can we bear a grudge sometimes. The problem with harboring negative feelings towards someone else is, again, it hurts the relationship, but it also does a lot more damage to us internally. In 1844, Captain Robert Stockton brought his ship, the Princeton, to Washington to display before government officials and leading social figures. While the ship was a technical marvel and its firepower was vast, Stockton was really proudest of the heaviest gun, one particular one. That gun, called the Peacemaker, was the biggest naval cannon then in existence. It weighed 13.5 tons and fired cannonballs that were a foot in diameter and weighed 225 pounds. The gun could shoot a cannonball several miles with a normal 25-pound charge of gunpowder, and the gun had been tested with up to a 50-pound charge pushing that shell. What power! During his celebration, the Stockton fired his gun repeatedly for a crowd made up of the president, his cabinet, influential senators, and dignitaries. While festivities were in full swing, down below, Stockton was summoned to fire the gun one more time by a couple of these politicians. So while most of the senators and the president and others did not come back up on deck this time, they fired the gun one more time. And it exploded, killing 2 members of the president's cabinet and a number of other influential men who were gathered. Had the explosion occurred at any point earlier, the gun probably would have removed the better part of the whole U.S. government. That gun was to be an amazing terror to an enemy. It was supposed to be, but it proved to be an explosive terror to friends. Retaliation and resentment are both explosive terrors, mostly to the one who is carrying them. Jesus says that there's a third way to deal with an enemy. Can you guess what it is? Love. Yes, love. We can love them. Sometimes for our own sake, that is the only way, only healthy way, that we can deal with our enemies. When Kenneth Godfrey of Locust Grove, Georgia, was 18 years old, his father died. All of his adult life, his father had owned and operated a service station, and people purchased items from them on credit. After his father died, his mother and he tried to run the service station, and keep it afloat, keep it going. His mother opened the station every morning, and then after school, Kenneth came and ran the station until it was closed in the evening. As he worked, he began to notice a large file of debts that had accumulated over the years, bills that had never been paid to them for services and products that they had rendered to people. Since his father had died, people had started refusing to pay all those old debts they owed. It was as if his death had canceled the debt. This bothered Kenneth. Statements were sent, and the statements were ignored. After a year and a half, Kenneth and his mother finally had to sell the station and get out of the business. But they kept that file of debts in hopes that some of those who owed them would someday pay. And another year went by. One Sunday afternoon, Kenneth's mother walked into the room with that file of debts in her hand and announced, "Son, there's something that is eating at me about these debts, and I've decided to do something about it." Kenneth thought, "We are finally going to get a lawyer." Kenneth asked, "What are you going to do?" She said, "I'm going to forgive him." "How are you going to do that?" Kenneth asked. She said, "Follow me, and I'll show you." They went out in the backyard and gathered some sticks. I made a fire in the old cookout grill in the backyard. Then she opened the file of debts, took one out, read their name aloud, tore it in half, and said, "I forgive you." And she dropped it into the fire. She looked at Kenneth and said, "Son, would you want to try it?" Kenneth said, I don't think I can." His mother said, "Son, you don't have a choice about it. If you want to be forgiven, you must forgive." Kenneth stood there in silence, watching her burn those debts. Finally, he reached into the file, got out a debt, read the name out loud, tore it up, and dropped it in the fire. It took a good 30 minutes for the two of them to complete the task. But when it was finished, it was as if a heavy burden had been lifted. As he forgave, he was forgiven himself and made whole again. Because of this demonstration in forgiveness, says Kenneth, that phrase in the Lord's Prayer, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us," has taken on a whole new meaning. Forgiving our enemies is the first step toward loving them. You say, "But Pastor, what they did to me was too horrible. I can't forgive that." And I ask, who is your anger and your resentment hurting the most? My guess is worse by far on you than it is on your enemy. Why not begin with a clean slate from this day forward, relieved of all that pain and pressure? Why not clear the decks and make a new start by forgiving? And maybe from there to loving. Amen? Amen. Amen.